It's cold. I don't know another way to say it. It is just cold. Hi there, welcome to the Bass Fishing Life. I'm your host, Steve Rogers. Before we get into the video, hit that subscription button and make sure you punch that notification bell, like the video, share it. Thank you so much. Well, you're probably wondering what I'm doing outside in the cold like this today, especially on a bass fishing channel. Well, you know what? If you love to bass fish and you are in those mid-states all the way up north and then into Canada, you might want to consider ice fishing for bass. Now, I know that sounds completely crazy and just ridiculous, and that's something that you may never do, but there's a lot of anglers in the northern part of the country that ice fish for bass all winter long. You have to remember there's many states where 4-5 months out of the year these largemouth and these smallmouth are under sheets of ice, and if you're addicted to bass fishing, you need to know how to go and get those particular fish, and that's what we're going to talk about today, some basic ice fishing tips for bass. Now, I know a lot of you, when you think of ice fishing, you think of panfish, crappie, bluegill, perch, that type of stuff, and once in a while we'll see on the internet some videos or photos of some huge muskie or northern brought through the ice. You can bring bass through the ice as well. So let's go ahead and get started with this particular video. The first thing that you're going to want to do is locate the fish. Holy cow, I have a hard time finding bass when it's open water. How do we begin to locate them when you have ice on the water? Here's the first thing that I would do. Wherever you found schooling fish, those offshore fish in the late fall or the last time that you were out on the lake, that's where I would start to punch your holes. If you were not out fishing in the late fall and not sure where those locations were, go ahead and get your normal topographical map, and to make it very easy, I would start on the ends, some deepest points on some very long tapering extended points. That'd be the first places that I would go, but hopefully you were out fishing in the fall and you located some schools of fish. That is where I would start. I would punch those holes right there. So that is the first tip for you if you're going to ice fish for bass. Start in the same place where you caught them in very, very late fall. First place to start. The second tip is make sure that you have something like an AquaView Micro, and I'll put the link down below in the description for you. You're going to want to have an underwater camera of some sort, and if you got an ice fishing hut, you have your established holes, yeah, you can get some of the higher priced AquaViews, but if you're just going to go out and randomly start to pop a few holes and try to locate those fish, the AquaView Micro is a good one to take with you. Punch that hole, drop that camera down there, and see if they're there. We discussed in an earlier video, in our winter fishing video, that these bass are going to be just glued right down to the bottom. And you don't want to waste a lot of time in a location that has no fish. So get one of those cameras, drop it down below, make sure you're in the right spot. It's even something that you and a buddy could go in together with if you're going to ice fish together. And I think the AquaView Micro, there's some of them in that $250 range or so. So it'd be a worthy investment if you're going to spend much time ice fishing for largemouth or smallmouth bass. So that is the second thing to do, okay? The third thing is go ahead and get an appropriate bait. A lot of guys that ice fish for largemouth and smallmouth like to use really small, micro-sized, lipless crankbaits, real tiny ones. There's a lot of good ones out there on the market. They're only about yay big. Some of them got rattles in there. And why that particular bait that seems awfully aggressive for wintertime fishing? Well, you're going to find when you drop that camera down there, if you hit a location where those bass are staged up in the wintertime, it is very likely to have 40, 50, 60 fish down there in that school. There's a ton of them. And remember, northern strain largemouth, they feed all throughout the winter because they're under the ice for so long. So if you've got a school with that many fish in it there, we're going to try to use that little rattling, lipless like crankbait and jig it, okay, jig it up and down to try to get some of the more aggressive fish to go ahead and hit. So that's the bait that I would start off with. Next, we need to talk about the rod. You're going to want a really nice ice fishing rod, but you're going to want to pick one up that has an extremely super fast tip to it. You want that tip to be able to bounce up and down very much like a spring bobber would. Very, very, very quick tip. There's several good brands out there in the market. I'll go ahead and put some down in the link below. Now, what about the line? As far as the line on this bass fishing rig, I'm going to want to use fluorocarbon. Why? Because it has no stretch with a very slight bite. If you're using monofilament that has a lot of stretch, and especially if you're fishing a little bit deeper water, you may not see that rod tip move at all or miss the bite. So make sure that you have fluorocarbon on there, and then if you want to put on a leader the last couple feet of some mono, that's a really light mono, 4 pound, 6 pound or whatever, you absolutely sure could do that, or just go a straight fluoro the whole way, but the goal is to eliminate as much stretch as possible. The next tip, so you got your rod, you got your bait, you found some fish down there, you got them located. Make sure that you grab a graph, okay? Grab one of your graphs. I like the graphs that have chirp on them, and go ahead and set them up. You know, you don't need your big 12-inch graph that you might have on your bass boat, but just a small little 7-inch graph is going to be perfect for this type of situation. And go ahead and drop that transducer down there through the hole. And as you're jigging, keep a close eye to the bottom. What you're going to see is the bottom, okay, it's going to look flat, and all of a sudden that bottom might thicken up a little bit. So you know there's fish down there, and that bottom might thicken up. That is a bass coming up and starting to take a look at what you've got going. And that line's just going to slowly move up, move up, move up, move up, move up, and that's when you want to get ready for the bite. And a lot of times you might kill the bait once that fish comes up off that line like that. But having a graph with you is going to work really well as to help you identify when those fish are moving up and down. You could also use the camera, but the problem with the camera is it's facing one direction, okay? So if that camera is facing this way and there's a bass coming from this direction, you're not necessarily going to see it. The camera might spin a little bit down there and you can't always see your bait. So the camera is great for locating them, but then go ahead and pull it out of there and then drop your transducer down, because you're going to get a wider cone and you're going to be able to see more of the bottom. So if you're asking yourself, why would I, if I've got a camera, why would I switch it out with the graph? That's why, because you can't always see everything going on with the camera. And when that line starts to come up, you know that fish is getting interested. Okay, so this would be the hard bottom. Bass has got belly down in the mud. You're jigging that little lipless crankbait and they start to come up just like this. And then when you see them getting about to your bait, and you will see your jig on the graph, it'll just be bouncing up and down. When those two lines are about to meet, that is where you might want to kill it or give it a little bit more subtle action, because before you've been popping it pretty hard to try to get their attention. You can have some amazing days on the water ice fishing for largemouth bass. You can go ahead and Google it on the internet. There's all kinds of excellent tips and suggestions out there, but dress properly and think about where those fish were last fall and go over some of these tips that I just talked about right now, and you can have a great day on the water. You might catch 30, 40, 50 largemouth in a day, and guess what? There's a good chance you're gonna have your spot all to yourself. Hey, don't forget to go out and encourage somebody today. You never know how you're going to change their life for the bass fishing life. I'm your host, Steve Rogers.